There's something about the way you make me feel inside. I'm counting down the days till we fly away, heading to the sun, only you and me. Don't wanna waste another day being stuck here in this place. No, wanna hold your hand in mine, watch the sunset in your eyes. Baby, I want us to act like we are 22 right now. Just let go, lose control, play songs on the radio too loud. This could be magical. Wow, wow. This could be magical. Wow, wow. To escape, and here we are, driving narrow streets in a rusty car, leading to the sea. Think we're getting close. We should take a pic, baby, strike a pose. I remember every day that I spent right here with you. Yeah, you are the one who makes me feel as good as I do. Baby, I want us to act like we are 22 right now. Just let go, lose control, play songs on the radio too loud. This could be magical. Wow, wow. This could be magical. Wow, wow.
Hey, good morning, guys, and welcome back. I'm Jennifer, and today I want to talk about our adolescent dogs. This is the period in raising a dog that most people would agree is probably the most difficult. Yes, puppies are a ton of work, but oh my goodness, the adolescent dog poses a whole new slew of challenges. And I don't think that we're really adequately prepared for that stage as new puppy owners. You get inundated with all of this really important information when you get a puppy, and it is all really, really important, and it becomes even more important when you realize what adolescence is like. But I think we need some preparation for what that next stage is, and how to deal with it. And today's topic was by request, so I hope you find this helpful. Now, just if you haven't been there yet, what people describe their adolescent dog to be is like they can seem just more unruly and out of control. It's like they forgot everything that you've already taught them, or they just refuse to listen. Sometimes they won't even look at you, and it's really it's annoying. It's really frustrating, but in some cases, it's expected. It's something that we can prepare for, and it's something that, if we're prepared, we can help guide them through so that they can continue to be the dog of your dreams. Now, what exactly is adolescence is not necessarily agreed upon. If you look this up, you will get various descriptions of when it might start and when it might end. Some sites might tell you adolescence starts at about 16 weeks. Some might say closer to 6 months. And when is it over? Oh my gosh, this question when I get this question, I never know exactly how to answer, because if I want to be honest and tell people, well, in some cases that sort of behavior, that phase, what you're seeing could last until they're a year and a half. That can sound like so long if you've just gotten through puppyhood and you're like, he looks like an adult dog, he's acting like a crazy animal. And how am I going to deal with this for another year? In some cases it might even last longer, but I think that with the proper understanding and the proper preparation, you'll retain your sanity throughout, and perhaps it won't last as long. And I think part of that is because our perception plays a huge role in what this is exactly, and I'll come back to that. But let's see. So yeah, as far as when it starts, when it ends, how long it lasts, who knows? We don't, there's not really a consensus. And partially that's because this hasn't really been studied in dogs. Most studies of animals tend to be done in mice and rats and primates. And what we know, or what we think we know about dogs and some other species generally is what we've gleaned from these studies of other mammals. And in a lot of cases, the same is true. Mammals have a lot in common, and they have a lot in common in terms of how they develop, although the timelines vary quite a bit because our lifelines vary quite a bit, right? Humans, relatively, tend to develop at a much slower rate. We take a much longer time to reach physical adulthood and mental adulthood, emotional adulthood, right? Whereas a lot of animals, it goes much quicker. So if you look at it that way, you know, that year and a half or whatever, what have you, doesn't sound so long when you're like, well, with a human, it takes 25 years. But it still feels a lot like a long time when you're just like, this is a lot to handle, So tell me, do you have a dog? Do you have a puppy and you're wanting to prepare for adolescence? Or are you in the thick of it with that adolescent dog and you're not sure what to do? Yeah, let me know. So the timeline varies. And even if we had like a better definition for dogs, it probably would still vary quite a bit between different breeds and just between individuals. We're all different, and I think that similarity of just individual differences is going to be the same across every species. But what we can agree on is that adolescence is a transition, right? It's the in-between complete puppyhood and full-on adulthood. It's that transition. And transitions can be hard to define. We humans, we love to categorize. We love to put very definite labels on things. And sometimes the real world just isn't that cut and dry. And when I'm talking, or when I'm thinking about transitions in general, I loved this analogy I heard once, which is of the coastline. What exactly is the coastline, right? It's not land, it's not the water, right? But it's a thing. It's a thing that we know what it is. We can talk about it. But it's neither of those things on the other side, right? So yeah, I think of adolescence as kind of like that. It's definitely different from puppyhood. It's definitely different from adulthood. But yeah, how do we really define it? I don't know. But that doesn't mean that we can't help you through it. And so, the other thing that we can agree on is that it's really the most difficult time for dog owners, especially first time dog owners. If you're just going through this the first time, it can feel especially hard. And I think that's probably the reason why dogs in that kind of age range tends to be the time that most dogs are relinquished back to shelters or rehomed, is because they're not a puppy anymore, but they're not acting like the adult you wanted, and people just, they don't know how to deal with it, and they feel like maybe sometimes they feel like that dog is faulty. They're not equipped to fix it, and that dog is just out of control. Oh gosh, and it breaks my heart too when I've seen this so many times through colleagues. Thankfully, I haven't had clients myself where this has happened, but I have seen people get a puppy, then at some point decide this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. They'll give it back, and they will immediately get another dog. And I'm like, that poor dog, because they're not faulty, right? They're just a dog, and dogs can be difficult. And yes, there is absolutely variability in behavior. I mean, that's to boil it down, that's really what it is. We don't all act exactly the same. We didn't all act the same going through our own adolescence. So certainly some dogs are going to be more or less difficult, but our definitions of difficult vary also. So yeah, it's a hairy situation all around. So anyway, my point here is that it's all kind of unclear. We don't have cut and dry information, and so I'm not going to claim to be an ultimate authority on this. I can't tell you exactly this is this and that is that, but what I can tell you is what I think, and so that's what we're going to do today. So let's talk about what the causes for why adolescence tends to be more difficult. Now, we do know from our own personal experience and from studies of other mammals that there's a lot, like internally, there's a lot of changes happening in that those early stages of life. When we call them stages, we tend to think like, oh, this is exactly, this is this age and this is this age, but it's not necessarily always the case. But we do know that there's tons, like most of our physical development is happening in the first part of our lives. And part of physical development is brain development, right? Your brain is a physical part of your body, and with brain development comes changes in behavior. Normal, expected. You went through it, I went through it, we all do. And I think that it's probably a pretty similar experience for our dogs in that they're experiencing changes in hormone levels. It feels like a bit like organized chaos in there, and changes. I heard this once, that change is stress, stress is change. They're kind of like, that's kind of what it is. And although that definition, there's room for improvement there, possibly, but I like it. I like it because I think it acknowledges the fact that it's difficult. Change is difficult, which causes stress. And adolescence for any animal, including ourselves, is inherently stressful, right? And when we talk about trigger stacking, like when there's stuff that happens in your life, if you have one difficult situation one day, yes, that's, like, if everything else is generally okay, you can probably handle it pretty well. But when you start having things pile on, when you say, people talk about when it rains, it pours, when it's a lot of things that are happening that are stressing you out, we end up pulling our hair out. It's harder to cope with any one of those individual things because it's a lot of stress. And so I think as that pertains to adolescence is that if everything about your body and your brain is changing so rapidly, it's a lot of change, it's a lot of stress, then everything else is going to be added stress on top of that, which makes it even more difficult, which is sometimes why I think we and dogs might have a harder time coping with other stuff going through life, and why we can be kind of harder to deal with, you know, us as an adolescent or our dogs as an adolescent. It's harder for them. And when you're having a harder time, you're not on your best behavior, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, in addition to, I mean, what do hormones do, right? Like, hormones are in your body to affect changes. And some of those other changes, especially, like, it's all about the brain, right? We kind of like, I think we are our brain, and our brain is like living in this body, and but like, your brain's really the most important thing, and your brain is changing tons during this time too, right? You're still forming tons of new neural connections, but also it's starting to slow down. Unlike that early puppyhood, I mean, neural connections are being made all over the place. That is the time that we refer to as the socialization period, when the brain, the canine brain, is open to having all of these new experiences and learning so much, and learning what's safe and what's not safe. But by the time, whenever that is, by the time we reach adolescence, some of those neural connections, the ones that are unused, are starting to get pruned. New ones are still being made, but again, like I said, it's starting to slow down. The brain, the physical brain structure, is changing. And so, of course, the behavior is going to be all over the place. If the brain is changing, the brain, it's like I said, organized chaos, brains are going haywire. And so, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot for your dog to be handling in that moment. And so, for that reason, I think going into it, you know, every day, making the choice every day to be really patient and understanding with your adolescent dog is kind of necessary. It's kind of the starting point, because if we don't have and take care of yourself, right? Like, if we haven't taken care of ourselves, and if we don't kind of remember and acknowledge that, like, our dog is going through a lot right now, then we tend to be shorter with them, and that doesn't help things. And I'm going to kind of talk about how I like to approach an adolescent dog in a way that sets them and you both up for the best possible success. But it really, this isn't restricted to adolescence. I'm like, well, this is kind of true throughout your dog's life. I think this is that we have to be patient. I think we have to be patient with everybody. Like, the more I think about it, it's like, this isn't just the adolescent dog. It's all it's your dog's whole life, and it's all dogs, and it's all animals, and it's other people. And, like, yeah, we really, I think more patience in the world would really, like, just make things go a lot smoother in a lot of cases. Certainly there are boundaries to that, but again, we'll come back to boundaries. So yeah, what causes it? This is my general, just kind of how I take what we know about other animals, and how we can expect that probably our dogs are experiencing similar things as biological beings on the planet Earth, and being mammals especially. I think it helps. I think it's an outlook that helps the relationship and helps their behavior. But what also might be going on as far as why we think adolescent dogs are just totally unmanageable, is that our perceptions have changed, right? When you have a tiny, adorable ball of fluff that you've just brought home, you kind of just think everything that they do is just really sweet and really harmless, and we let them get away with a lot, you know? We excuse it because, yeah, why? They're adorable. They're puppies. I mean, oh my goodness. And so your perception, when that same adorable fluff has become larger, stronger, if they're doing the exact same behaviors, they could be mouthing your body, they could be chewing up your valuables at home. They could be, let's see, jumping on you. Oh, that's a big one. Exact same behaviors, right? Puppies do all of those things. Your adolescent may be doing all of those things. But our perceptions change because all of a sudden they're bigger and stronger. And we say all of a sudden, that's definitely not okay. And so it's not necessarily that the behavior itself has changed, but we certainly see it differently, and we think, oh my gosh, like this, yeah, the adolescent dog, like this is so not okay. And what that means for the dog, from the dog's perspective, is that like all of a sudden you've changed all the rules, or, I mean, they're not thinking that because they don't know that there's rules unless you've been very clear with your behavior, not your words. They don't know that there's like rules, but all of a sudden you are responding differently to them. They could have jumped on you for months and you love it and you laugh and you play with them and you give them all the love and attention. But all of a sudden they're bigger now and they do the same thing and you're like pushing them off and you've got your angry face and your angry voice and they're like, all of a sudden you just got scary, but they didn't do anything differently. And it's really confusing to them on top of everything that's going on in their body, right? And so it's unfair, but it is in some cases, a lot of it is about our perception of those exact same behaviors. And let's see. So yeah, part of that in between, right? We've got the puppyhood, we've got the adolescence, and then we've got the adulthood. Part of that overlap between puppyhood and adulthood means that they've still got all that energy, right? They might even have more energy than they did when they were like a baby puppy. They haven't reached that point where they're starting to mellow out into adulthood. So same behaviors, more energy, more bodily changes, and you've changed your response to them and it's confusing. That's a lot. It's a lot for them to handle. And the behaviors it might be the same behaviors. They might even be more entrenched, right? Because they've practiced it from the day they got home to live with you until when you started to change the rules. They probably have weeks to months of practicing the wrong behavior that you didn't like. And so behaviors like that, behaviors that have gone uncorrected or maybe even rewarded. I mean, because essentially when you laugh and you give attention and you petting and play, when you do all that for the jumping when they're little, you're actually rewarding and reinforcing that behavior. And so that becomes much harder to change once they are an adolescent. So yeah, that's some of what can contribute to the problem. And I'm not going to say cause the problem because I think a lot of it is inherent. But yeah. So yeah, it's a little bit unfair to them when we change the rules suddenly like that. But here's what we can do. There is a lot of ways. There's a lot of things, and I think they're all important. All of these ways to help your dog get through that period while learning all of the right behaviors and habits, and help you retain your sanity throughout. Because it's not easy. I'm not gonna lie to anybody. Like it's not easy, and especially if you've committed to creating a relationship with your dog where you are not using aversive methods and punishments. The way that I train and work with people and animals, I'm sorry, but it requires more patience, because I think of it as it's a lot more effort up front. It's an investment, but you get a lot better, longer return out of it. Because when we try to punish behaviors, it creates this cycle where you might create a sneaky dog, you might, and it generally doesn't make the behavior you're trying to punish go away entirely. You create all of these other problems. sometimes it appears to have an immediate benefit, but in the long term, it doesn't work out as well as we'd like it to. And so I say this to say that it's a choice. People choose, and I spend too much time on social media, you guys, and I see a lot of both sides, and it can be difficult. But I just have to acknowledge that, like, it is a choice. It's every dog owner's choice as to how they want to interact with their animal, and it's not for me to decide. It's not for anybody but you to decide how you want to be, how you want to show up in that relationship. I'm just here to explain to people how I work and why. But with that comes, the acknowledgement that, you're going to get a lot out of it, but it does feel like a lot up front. But I really think that's what raising a dog is. And I think that's what, that's what raising a child is. It's like, if you wanted to have this relationship in your life, which is why we get dogs, then it comes with that, early responsibility. That's my view, but yeah, anyway. So what do we do? What can we do with our adolescent dogs? First of all, you knew I was going to come back to this, is to meet their needs. And what that means is you have to understand that their needs have changed slightly. The adolescent dog, like I said, is going to have a lot of energy, possibly even more energy than when they were a puppy, and they need outlets for that. I see dogs, at least in this country, in America, that are severely under exercised. They need outlets for that energy, and not just both, not just physical energy. They don't just need to go on a walk. Walks are not really enough physical exercise. They can be great mental exercise if you're letting your dog sniff a lot, but they need that mental stimulation, and they need physical exercise. And just when you thought you were getting out of the hard work of handling all the puppy stuff, you're like, oh, my dog needs more. I have to do more. Well, maybe you don't necessarily have to do more. You can hire it out. And I think there are some good options out there that are good for multiple reasons. But yes, however you go about it, your adolescent dog needs physical exercise and mental exercise, both. I love to talk about daily puzzle feeding enrichment, but enrichment, they need a I hate the word pronged, but it's a multi-pronged approach, where you're meeting physical exercise. They're getting chances to smell new things. Their noses need stimulation. They are getting socialization. Oh, that's point number 2. Continued socialization. We heavily, nowadays, I'm seeing it more and more, which is great. We heavily stress the importance of proper early socialization during that puppyhood socialization period. However, that doesn't mean that socialization ends at whatever date we gave you. No. Socialization should, if your dog, it should continue through adolescence, as long as your dog is enjoying interactions. That is what proper socialization is. We shouldn't be forcing a dog into any situation that they're uncomfortable or fearful in. It should always be enjoyable. That's one of the keys to proper socialization, and that should continue throughout adolescence. If we do all this work, we're going to puppy socials, we're having play dates, just because everybody told you that's what you're supposed to do when they're under 4 months old, but it has to continue. If all of a sudden they stay at home most of the time, and they don't get to play, that's hard, and it's also gonna stunt their social skills, and nobody wants that, trust me. So yeah, continued socialization. That is part of meeting their needs. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that like I said, with the physical exercise and mental stimulation, socializing is huge mental stimulation, because navigating social interactions requires a lot from the brain of a social animal. That's what we've got these brains for, is to navigate social interactions. And I believe that our dogs are the same. They are even more social than we are. And so they need it. They need it. So a couple things that you could do, if this is sounding like a lot, is hire it out. Like I said, there are dog walkers, dog daycares, there's and kind of everything in between. There's so many different types of services. Yes, this varies a lot based on where you're located, but these services exist, and there's right now a lot of people have gotten dogs, and I'm hearing that a lot of pet businesses across the board, walkers, sitters, boarding, vets, groomers, all the pet services, we're busy. There's a lot going on because a lot more people have gotten animals in the last year and a half. And so they're full. So if you've got a dog and you're thinking, I might want to do these things, get in there early. Call it early, so that you don't have to wait when you really, really need it. So anyway, but yeah, reaching out, finding a good fit for you and your dog, for somebody else who can kind of take some of the load off, by doing that exercising and socializing for you. And if you can find one of those professionals whose values align with your own about how to treat an animal, because again, what your animal does out in the world with other people and the behaviors that they get to rehearse outside, is going to affect their behavior overall as well. So hopefully you want to ask a lot of questions and hire someone who is going to handle behaviors the way that you would, for consistency. And yeah, but getting your dog something to do. I mean, it's a huge benefit to them, obviously. But another point that I wanted to make about it is that if you're able to send your dog off on an adventure every day, or even a couple times a week, gives you a break, right? And I think that having a break for yourself plays a huge role in getting through that adolescent time with your sanity intact. We have to have breaks. It's really hard. I fully admitting, raising dogs is hard work. There's just no denying that. Unless you got really lucky, it's hard work. And so it's a treat for yourself too, to give yourself a break. And it will help your relationship, because you will come back feeling a little bit more relieved, a little bit more refreshed, and your dog will have had all those needs met, and so they're going to come back with behavior that you probably find more acceptable. Hello, hi Julio. Can you tell us about your dog? Are you dealing with an adolescent dog, or are you thinking about getting a dog? Let us know what you've got going on at home. Happy to answer questions or help if I can. But yeah. So, all right. So we said meet their needs. We said continue socialization. We said give yourself a break. So important. And if you can't do like a daily dog walker or daycare or a situation like that, maybe even just the occasional sending them for a couple overnights, to stay with a friend, or with a professional who watches dogs overnight. Something to give yourself a break. It's so important. But let's moving on. The other ways to handle and shape their behavior for the better, is that it's really important to continue to manage their behavior. Now, when we talk about management in a dog training context, management is everything that's not technically training, but it falls under the umbrella of we're preventing the wrong behaviors from happening while we teach the right behaviors. And management, usually what I'm referring to is using crates and gates and tethers and doors and pens. These tools that we use to prevent the dog from making the wrong choice when we're not there to guide them. In a lot of cases these days, people do all of that stuff. They do all of the right things when they first brought that puppy home, which is wonderful, because it's going to be all that the more easy to deal with that when they're older if you've already had these things in place. But they're kind of obnoxious. You might think that they're kind of obnoxious. It's a lot. It's like extra stuff that you have to have in your home. You might have had to rearrange furniture. It can be kind of annoying and like unsightly maybe. And not only that, but like we want to be giving our dogs more freedom, right? And that's completely respectable. I love it. Excuse me for a second. Got an itchy nose. But yeah, so we've got all that stuff when they're puppies, often because they're not potty trained yet, and potty accidents are like no fun for anybody. So we want to like tear them down, put them away, and give our dogs more freedom as quickly as possible. And I love that. I think that's great because dogs, I want to give them freedom too. But if we're giving them freedom when they're not ready, meaning they're still making the wrong choices, and those choices are unacceptable for life in your home, in the human world, then we're setting them up to fail, and you're going to be frustrated and it's not going to go well. So we have to keep those things in place for as long as we need until we've taught them the right behaviors. Maybe you already know that, but I think in a lot of cases they come down too early. And so, yeah, really hard, but we have to keep the management in place. And similarly, the rules of your home, we kind of talked about how, if we let a puppy jump, until they're 6 months old, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, you're too big to be jumping now. And we change the rules. It's really hard. We want to put those boundaries in place, decide, how do you want, before you even bring your puppy home, or that's the best time. If not then, today, second best time. But decide what you want the rules of your house to be. The dog, or surrounding the dog. Is jumping allowed? You can decide it is. That's fine. But if it's not, if you don't want that, then put that boundary in place from day one, and set them up to succeed. If you see them approaching you and you know that your dog is going to put their paws on your pants or what have you, then you're gonna back up. You're gonna give them something else to do. You're gonna toss a treat. You're gonna hold out a toy. You're gonna give them the right choice before they can make the wrong choice. And we start that in puppyhood, or as early as we possibly can. If they came to you as an adolescent, great. Start then, day one, or today, like I said. But we have to know what the rules are in order to enforce them. And it's really not fair to enforce a rule if you haven't already taught them the better alternative. So this is what I mean, is we have to stick with the boundaries that you've set. So if jumping was the rule, we can't just let it slide sometimes and then get mad when it does happen, because we haven't told the dog. Our dogs don't understand English. They can't. And so the only way that they know what the rules are, actually, I don't want to use the word know, because when we talk about like knowing versus not knowing, I think it creates this really like black and white distinction. And I don't believe that dogs really like understand things in that way, the way that we do. For them, I think it's more, it's like, have you ever, like if you've taken, you may have been presented various tests throughout your school age days. Sometimes or if you've ever like taken an IQ test for fun, or like maybe even in the ACT, and just when we humans are given tests, a lot of times there's a section about pattern recognition. And we're not given words, we're given like series of shapes or numbers, right? And we're supposed to like figure out the pattern. And that's kind of how I think that dogs learn. It's like they're trying to figure out a pattern. And for simplicity's sake, say they're presented with a pattern of they jump, their person like pet them on the head. The next day they jump and the person kneed them in the chest. The next day they jump and the person like just walked away. The next day they jumped and the person gave them some more scratchies. They're like, there's no pattern for them to pick up. But the more consistent you are, the faster and easier it is for them to understand what the pattern is. And we want to make it so that the pattern of getting to what they want, which is often our attention, and maybe petting and sometimes food, and could be a lot of things. But we wanted to make it so that the pattern leads them to a reward for them, because that's the behavior that they will continue to choose day after day. Now, this is part of why adolescence is hard, is because, like I said, their brains are all over the place, which means for a while their behavior's all over the place. But it's helpful to understand that also learning doesn't happen in a straight line. It's not, yeah, I don't know how else to explain it. When you learn something, you don't just get better and better and better and better and better until you're like a world expert. It's a little bit of up and down. The general trend, if you're learning systematically, the general trend should be upward. But you're gonna have good days and bad days, and sometimes you're gonna get it right, and that's natural, that's normal. And that's how our dogs are gonna learn too. They're gonna make mistakes, they're gonna forget, they're gonna, but understanding that the more consistent we can be, the easier time they will have picking up on what is the pattern, how do I get to the goal, how do I get to what I want, and yeah. So setting boundaries and being consistent in upholding them will take you far. Now, I think that, and you can probably relate to this, when we go from like, I don't know, childhood into adolescence, a lot of the friction that we experience between us and, say, our parents or whoever's taking care of us comes from feeling like you don't have enough freedom within the boundaries. And I think that the same goes for dogs, and it's part of meeting their needs, is that we have to provide them options, and a lot of options that you consider to be the right choice, right? If we decide, okay, in our home we have a boundary that there is no chewing on the furniture. Okay, that's reasonable, and fairly easy to be consistent with. If you ever catch your dog chewing on the furniture, you're probably gonna stop it immediately, because furniture is very expensive. So clear rule, easy to be consistent about. But in order to get that dog from where you can trust, from when they are chewing on the furniture to where you can trust them not to, with freedom in the house, there are steps to get there, right? We have to, like I said, use management, meaning if you're not there to watch, they don't have access to the furniture, which means they're in another room, they're in a pen, they're in a crate, they're outside. And so you've put up management so that they can't make the wrong choice. But that freedom that I'm talking about is we have to provide them with stuff that they like to chew instead. Within their life, they have to be given options. Because sometimes it's like, yeah, well, I got him 5 chewies, and he doesn't really like any of them. Guess what? There's so many options out there. There's so many different types of dog toys and chews, and just I mean, the sheer volume of different products out there today is kind of mind-blowing. And so if your dog likes to chew and you just haven't found the thing that they like to chew other than your table legs yet, keep going, keep shopping. You're going to find something. And that's what I mean by providing freedom within that boundary, is we have to give them an appropriate outlet. So they need that freedom within a structure, and you have to be consistent in enforcing that structure, enforcing your boundaries in a kind, patient way. And possibly lastly, is that we have to keep practicing. If you've taken your puppy to puppy class, maybe even multiple puppy classes if you're really on it, that's wonderful. But of course, learning doesn't stop when your dog hits a certain age. Learning doesn't stop when we hit a certain age either. And especially when they're going through this time where the way that we tend to talk about adolescent dogs is that they're like testing boundaries and they're pushing limits and they just don't want to listen. That's when they need guidance the most. So we have to keep practicing all that stuff that you taught them during puppyhood. When I taught puppy classes, we used to tell people, like, you'll come back for the adolescent class, and your puppy may look like they forgot everything that you taught them already. They didn't. It's not the case. But what I think happens is that, much like humans, as they grow and develop, their interests change slightly. For example, I mean, when we talk about dogs, like, their interests are often the same. They often want social time. They often want social time with their own species as well as with humans. They like chewing on things. They like food. They like playing, although the type of play may vary quite a bit. But when they're little, they want a lot more. Usually this. I mean, I'm speaking in broad strokes here, but generally, young puppies they're very attached to us. They want to hang out with us. They want to do things with us. Everything that we do is interesting to them. It's like the training comes easy a lot of times at that age. Not always. If you've got a puppy who's still young and very difficult, like, I can empathize, because we've seen that too. It happens. But as they get older, they tend to be more interested in exploring things on their own, and kind of being more independent, much the same way that we are when we're going through that period of adolescence. Is that, yeah, we love our parents. Like, we want to be able to depend on them. We want, often, even if we won't admit it, we want guidance from them. But we want to be able to make choices on our own. We want to be able to explore on our own. And it looks the same. It looks the same for our dogs. And that's fine. That's good. We should still be there to guide them and to, again, we've set up the boundaries, and then, like, within that boundary, fine, go explore. That could literally mean physically a boundary. That's what a dog park is, really. It's like, I've taken you to this place. There's a fence. Here's a boundary. Go explore. Go do what you want to do. And I think that's why a lot of dogs like dog parks, is because they know you're there. They don't want you to leave without them. But for a minute, they're just gonna, like, go hog wild, because that's what they want. They want to be a little independent. So yeah, I mean, that may be why it looks in some cases like they just forgot everything that they used to do so easily. They would sit every time you asked. They'd come when you call, and all of a sudden they're just not listening. It's not that they didn't hear you. Here's what could have happened, and what we can do is, first of all, don't stop practicing. When you graduate that class, either take another one, or don't forget to use the things that you taught your dog on a regular basis. This could mean several times a day. It could mean once a week, but use it and reward the behavior when you see it. That's number 2, is don't take behavior that you like for granted. This this is it, guys. This is the biggest thing probably that I see, is that people, when their puppy does what they want, just whenever, we don't reward it. We take it for granted. People, the people who don't want to use food for training probably struggle with this the most, because they're trying to remove food from the training scenario as quickly as possible, not realizing that dog, their behavior is going to change. And if you haven't reinforced it appropriately up until that point, that behavior is going away. If it doesn't get rewarded, that behavior will stop. That's a law of nature, much like gravity. That's just how it is. So behavior has to be reinforced with something that the animal finds reinforcing. They're the ones that define what a rewarding thing is. And food's an easy one in a lot of cases. It's why I use it, but it's not the only thing that works. You can use play, you can use toys, you can use opening a door, you can use your attention and petting and eye contact and talking to them. A lot of that stuff tends to be like the attention from us tends to be really high in their hierarchy of like what matters to them when they're puppies. And so sometimes you can get away with rewarding behavior with that when they're little. However, like I said, their interests change a little bit, or maybe not their interests. Maybe that was the wrong way to say it. Maybe it's more that their priorities have shifted when they go into adolescence. And so that's not the time to like scale back the training. That's the time to really ramp it up and really reevaluate which rewards matter more and less to your dog. Literally write it out, make a list. Right now, in this period of my dog's life, he tends to value playing with other dogs. That's his highest reinforcer. And then steak, and then kibble, and then, throw in play, and then maybe at that time of their life, it can hurt a little bit. I mean, trust me, I understand. I take it personally sometimes. But sometimes the attention and like praise from us, yeah, maybe they still like it, but it might be the lowest rung on that hierarchy of what matters to them, which means it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be reinforcing enough to maintain certain behaviors. And recall is like the big one. Like that's the thing that people are like, man, my puppy used to always come when I call, but now all of a sudden he doesn't. And a couple things you can do is really up the ante on the reward that they get for coming when called, which in some cases might actually be, if they come when you call, they get to go back and play again. That could be the reward. I do heavily advocate using food in addition, if the situation is right, meaning probably there's not other dogs around so they don't fight over that resource, but getting to leave you and go play might just be it. But again, the rewards are defined by your learner, not by you. And so we kind of have to, maybe once once you notice their behavior starting to change, reevaluate. I mean, sit down, think about it, talk about it with whoever else lives with your dog and knows your dog. Like, what do we think is more important? What do we have control over that we can use as reinforcement for the behaviors that we want to see maintained? I don't want to miss your comments here, guys. Thank you for participating. So Julio says, don't take behavior that you like for granted. Seems like an important life lesson. Oh my gosh. And Julio, you're so like, yeah, that's so true. It's not just true for dogs. You're right. This is one of the things that like really hit me right in the solar plexus when I learned it originally. It was like, oh my gosh, like, this is true for our human relationships. And it's one of the things that I was like, wow, your human relationships can really, really get a boost and improvement when we don't take for granted the things that we like. If you like it when your sister calls you, don't be a grumpy poo-poo when she calls you. This is a personal example. I'm talking about myself here. But anyway, yeah, stuff like that. It's reward behavior you like. Thank you for reiterating that. It's crucial. And then Jeff says, Uh, about food, is there ever a time that you can phase out food, rewards, and pay sometimes? My dog does not care for petting and attention, or that's how it seems. And remind me, Jeff, how old is your? It's a mini Schnauzer, right? Um, she's been like that since she was a puppy. Okay, yeah. And oh, I mean, Schnauzers are like high up on their I mean, they're terriers, right? And a common breed characteristic of terriers is that they really, really enjoy chasing moving objects, critters. We don't always have control over actual wild animals, but one way that we can kind of replace that is with flirt poles, tug toys. Some flirt pole is basically like kind of like a fishing pole. It's a stick with a string with like basically a tug toy on the end of it, and so you can make it move really fast and really far, and they get to chase it, and it tends to be a really, really highly motivating reward for a terrier like dog. Okay, you've got one. Great. I have to lock it up. And she's 1 year and 3 months. Okay. So yeah, is it about phasing out the food? It depends. Everybody loves that answer, don't they? Is there a specific behavior that we're talking about? Because the way that I tend to think about, oh gosh, this is about to be a complicated answer, isn't it? So kind of how we talked about the hierarchy of rewards, and food, and different foods, kind of fit in there wherever, depending on the dog. You also have a hierarchy of how expensive behaviors are, right? Okay, for common cues like sit and down. So yeah, if we've got a hierarchy of like how expensive behaviors are, meaning how hard does the animal feel like it is to do that behavior, and sitting and sit and down tend to be on the lower end of the spectrum. Of course, they're harder the more that's going on around the dog, right? Like sitting, asking for a sit or a down in your house is easier than asking for it on a quiet street corner, is easier than asking for it at the park, in any park. But generally sitting is going to be easier than something like a recall. And again, within recall, we can click on that one, open that up, and recall's easier in the house, harder, depending on. And for a Schnauzer, a recall's going to be hardest probably when there's like a squirrel or a bunny, or things like that. So for easy behaviors in easy situations, yeah, I think it's a good idea to start phasing out the food. And when I start to phase the food out of any behavior, I like to be thinking about what is the animal getting instead? Can I replace the food with something else? And so for her, you said she doesn't care for petting and attention, but it depends on the situation too, right? Like there's practice, like, and this was actually going to be one of my points here, about our practice. So let me kind of weave this answer into what I was going to say about continuing the practice from puppyhood into adolescence. We don't stop training. You may be wanting to teach them more things, but all the stuff that you taught them already, we want to keep it warmed up, right? Like muscles. If we stop exercising, we lose those muscles. Same with cues for behaviors that we taught our dog. But with adolescents, because we are presented with this challenge of them looking like they just don't care about us at all, and they don't want to listen, and they don't want to look at us, and they don't. We don't want to practice when they're not listening, because what's happening then, when we use a cue, so something simple like sit, we taught it during puppyhood. Every time we said sit, they sat. We rewarded them. Maybe we stopped rewarding them. I don't know. But if we all of a sudden the dog's an adolescent, we say sit, and they won't sit. And then we start repeating it and repeating it, and they won't sit. What's actually happening there is we're rehearsing this situation where they're hearing the cue and not sitting, and choosing to ignore you or do something else instead. And so you're practicing it, but you're practicing it in the opposite direction that you want. And so I don't recommend, if couple things. If you need them to sit and they're not sitting, don't keep trying to get them to do it right then and there. Get them further from that situation, to a distance or a place where they're able to offer you more attention. But the more we like try and beg our dogs to just listen and just pay attention to us, the more they don't want to. I mean, I kind of feel the same way too. Like if somebody's like just nagging at me, it's like, I just don't want to deal with them anymore, right? And that's how it looks to me that dogs are too. And so what we want to do instead is we know there's a situation where it's really hard for them to listen. So get them out of there. Don't try and practice right then and there. You're gonna keep practicing, but practice in easier situations and use a structured plan to work them up, add in the distractions until they can listen in that situation. And throughout that plan, we have to continue. If it's food, it's food, but we have to continue to use a reward that they deem valuable. And as much as we want to remove food because we don't always have it with us, you can't, if that's the thing, if that's the only thing that your dog finds reinforcing and that you have control over, then that's what you use. That's just how it is. But once it becomes easy for them, so if they still sit beautifully in the house and it's no problem, then maybe you don't need to use food then. But I also don't recommend with your adolescent asking them when there's no point, right? If you don't really need them to sit and there's nothing that you can give them that they really care about, then it's like, why are we doing this? This is how I'm imagining what's like going on in their head. It's purely my imagination here, but I think that when we ask them to do the same thing over and over, and it's like there's no point in it for them, then they tend to ignore it. Maybe when it does matter, it's because they're like, this doesn't. Why are you making me do this? And so, yeah. So to kind of answer your question again after that is like you can start to phase it out. When you can either replace it with something else that your dog does find reinforcing, or when it's so easy for them and it's so habit that, and they enjoy it and they don't like, yeah. But yeah, the other thing that I tend to think sometimes with adolescent dogs, I tend to think of using, actually even with puppies, using reverse psychology with dogs, right? And this is particularly helpful, I think, with the adolescent who doesn't want to pay attention to us, is when we think of it as, it's not, you're going to pay attention to me and then you're going to get rewarded for it. It's like, no, you getting to train with me, you getting to me to pay attention to you, and you getting to work with me, that's a privilege that you get for offering me your attention. And it kind of flips the situation so that instead of us begging, kind of like I said, like where we're like, just please look at me, pay attention to me, do what I'm asking, all these things, it kind of puts them off. And so if we flip the script and we pay attention to them when they come to us and they offer us attention, this isn't something I would say like, oh, just go out and start this new protocol like outside at the park or something. But if that's the dynamic that you've set up at home and they've had time to recognize the pattern, you will have a dog who offers you attention more readily without you having to ask. It's so hard. It's so hard to do. I've seen it so many times where I'm like, okay, we're going to get your dog to pay attention to you in class right now. And I want you to just do nothing. Do nothing. Do not call your dog. Just watch them quietly. Don't like wave an arm, don't drop a treat, just do nothing and just wait. Because it might take a while, it might feel like forever, but there will be a moment when your dog will turn and look at you. And that's the moment you choose to bring out whatever it is your dog likes. If it's sometimes a cue itself can become a reward for another cue. You know, a lot of dogs tend to like the hand touch cue because it's easy and it leads to something fun, like either just a treat or maybe you toss a treat. Tossing treats is, oh gosh, for your terrier. If you're handing her treats, you can even up the ante by, instead of handing them to her from your hand, tossing them away, because then they get to chase it and it's food. Amazing. But yeah, so but it's so hard in the beginning to just wait. It's so hard to wait because we want to like try to get them to look at us. But if we wait and use whatever you were going to do anyway, if you're going to use that as a reward, then they become more likely, because we know behaviors that get rewarded happen more often, becomes more likely that they're going to turn and look at you more often. And turning and look at you means offering you attention. And then you can have a dog who's paying you more attention of their own free will. Oh my gosh, an adolescent offering you attention. Can you believe it? So actually, this is maybe the place to start while you're still using food and using a treat toss especially, or find it if you know that. You can create this nice little chain where you've got, she looks at you, you say find it, then you get your treat, and then you toss it and she gets to chase it. And what's she gonna do after she eats that treat? She's gonna come right back. And you've got this nice, beautiful little loop where she comes to look at you. Yeah. I made a short, stupid little video of me trying this similar kind of strategy with Dizzy this week, where I was trying to get him to walk at heel. It's not a strict like competition obedience heel or anything like that, but just, you know, keep pace with me. Like that's what most of us all we want. So I think I'll have to go probably and post it on my Instagram shortly, now that I've mentioned it. But I was trying to do this where if I'm just walking along and he comes up and walks with me, I say find it and toss a treat, and he chases it off and goes away. But what does he do right after he eats it? Comes right back in line, and we walk, treat, he goes, gets it, and comes right back. And all of a sudden, I haven't called him. I haven't like tried to get him to come stand next to me. What I've done is actually tried to get him to go away by tossing treats. And all of a sudden I have a dog who's glued to my side. So that's kind of what I mean by reverse psychology. And I think it works exceptionally well with our adolescents. It's not a magic bullet. It doesn't work exactly right, beautifully, immediately on day one, but it's a little game that you can play, and you'll start to see them offer it more and more as the days and weeks pass. And since adolescence can seem to last forever, I think it's worth the investment. So have I answered the question, Jeff? It's so iffy. It kind of depends. It depends on where you're asking, what your dog finds reinforcing. If you've got other things that you can use, so just as one little example, say you're in a yard. I don't know if you've got a backyard of your own, but if you're in some kind of place where you can play with the flirt pole, and you can, instead of just bringing it out and playing, you can incorporate those cues that you want her to learn, like you're sitting, you're down, and instead of offering a treat, sometimes you ask for the sit for, you know, whatever duration the sit is supposed to be. Mark it with your click or your yes, whatever you use, and then instead of offering the treat, that's when you make the flirt pole go crazy, right? And because it's so reinforcing to her, it will have reinforced the sit or the down, or, you know. So that's one way that you can start to phase the treats out, so that it's not food every time. And probably, it sounds like for her, the flirt pole might even be a higher value reinforcer than food. And so you might get some really good results with that. So, Jesse, welcome. And if you're still here, do you have any questions about adolescent dogs? Because otherwise, I think, yeah, if you guys don't have any other questions, we'll wrap it up here. I know that this training an adolescent dog, like that's when they need the most training. So this is something we could probably talk about again and again. But yeah, I know it's hard. I know adolescence is it's the hardest time. But we thought puppyhood was hard, but adolescent dogs pose their own challenges, and I feel for you, I really do. I talk about the one day we'll get another dog. It didn't happen this year like I thought, but when we're ready, we'll get another dog, and I think at that time I do want to get a puppy, which I'm telling myself now, I know that means I have to go through puppyhood. I have to go through the dog's adolescence, and just to get to that adult dog. And it's a lot of work, and you got to know when you get a pup that's what you're signing up for. It's not just cuteness and then you've got your dream dog. And so if you know anybody, or if anybody's out there and they haven't gotten a dog but they're thinking about it, and they're weighing the options, I know everybody wants a puppy, but sometimes if you don't want to do all of this that we've talked about, jumping in and getting an adult dog is sometimes the way to go. I know plenty of trainers who are like, I love puppies, but man, it's so much. And adolescence, oh, it's so much. So, yeah. Plus, there are so many like wonderful adult dogs who need homes. So I just have to throw that in there. But anyway, yeah, it's a lot. The responsibility of parenting a dog at any age, but especially adolescence, it's hard work. And so I commend you for putting it in. I mean, Jeff, you've done what I've learned that you've done with your little girl is amazing. I'm so impressed that you've gone to so many classes and that you're continuing to work with her and to learn and to guide her. It's just it's a beautiful thing, and I'm sure that even if she can't say it with words, I'm sure she appreciates it. Jesse, what kind of puppy? A puppy is a lot of work, but it's great. Yeah, it is. It is. Are you asking what kind I would get? I know it'll be a small dog. I really like Poms and Papillons. I want like a very small. I want to choose a breed that with tendency to be very friendly, aka easy to socialize to other humans and dogs and animals, and those are my main two criteria. I have there's so many breeds that I really like, but small tends to narrow the pool quite a bit. So that's what we know. I know we were on a waiting list for a Pomeranian back in January, and decided it was not the right time, which was just heartbreaking. But ultimately, I think it was absolutely the right choice, because there's a lot going on right now, and there's still a lot of stuff that I'd like Dizzy to work through before we bring in that huge responsibility. And so it was ultimately the right choice. It's going to happen one day, just not yet. So yeah, I agree with you though. It's a lot of work, but it's great. It's worth it. And frankly, the challenges of adolescence, like, I don't know. While I say it's a lot, and some days like I do want to pull my hair out, working with adolescent dogs, it really is. It's very rewarding, I think, to see the change, to see them learn. It's pretty cool too, you know. Especially if you're like interested in that development and in behavior and in learning. It's fascinating stuff. Hard when you're the sole or the primary guardian, or with most of the responsibility. It is hard, but it's cool too. I love those guys. Plus, we got through it. They can get through it. So anyway, thank you all for joining me, and for asking questions and sharing what you guys are going with your dogs at home. So yeah, I hope this has helped. And as always, if you have any other questions, I'm always here. You can leave them in the comments or shoot me a message on social media or through email. And of course, if you've not already subscribed, it really, really helps me if you do, or if you share the video too. So thanks again, and I will see you next week. All right, have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.